Five Nights at Freddy's is a pretty old franchise now, over 10 years old. That's, well, it's kind of insane to think about. I was obsessed with this game when I was 11 years old, all the way back in middle school. While it's quite impressive that this series has managed to thrive for so long, those 10 years have brought some issues with it. After all, the game's creator, Scott Cawthon, isn't some crazy mastermind that had everything figured out from the start. He's actually far from it. You've all heard the story on the origins of FNAF at this point, so I'm not going to waste your time with that one. The point of this video is to talk about the problems that come with a series that had such a unexpected and surprising rise to fame, and how these problems could be solved. Before we jump in, I just want to say that a lot of the people watching this video are not subscribed, so if you enjoy this video, you should subscribe to see more stuff like this from me. With that out of the way, let's begin.
Was that the bite of 87?
A lot of choices made for FNAF, especially early on, were, how do I say this, not exactly the most reasonable or well thought out. What do I mean by that? Let me explain. Let's look at the release dates for the earliest titles in the series. FNAF 1 released on August 8th, 2014, with fairly minimal development time. FNAF 2 released just about 3 months later, November 11th, 2014. That's not a whole lot of time to develop a game, but it is possible. FNAF 3 had a little more time, releasing March 2nd of 2015. The short development time between each of these games is, in hindsight, a bit of a problem. The gameplay itself is fine, except for FNAF 2. FNAF 2 kind of sucks, but I'm not here to critique that aspect today. Think about developing a trilogy of games and trying to have a coherent story between them with little to no mistakes. That's the problem here. Small things like the newspaper in FNAF 1, for example, saying that someone was convicted, yet we don't know who this is even today. I personally think this one was actually just completely abandoned and retconned. More things like the FNAF 4 box, which even Scott himself has completely forgotten about.
All of that to say, there is something in the box, but I never pursued it, and I don't know if I can find it again.
Or the withered animatronics somehow being fixed up to appear in the first game. What about the bite of 87? Who did it? We still don't know, and I suspect we never will. These are all just small details, but they add up to create all these problems even in the modern era of the franchise. I haven't even mentioned the major things missing from the timeline, like the origins of Freddy's as a whole, Afton's wife literally never being present, or why the FNAF 4 house is connected to the sister location bunker. Early FNAF is filled with these details that, yeah, we kind of have answers for some of them, but none of them feel concrete and none of them feel satisfying. None of these answers feel fully correct, and that's because there was likely never a correct answer. I believe that Scott never fully thought about a lot of the questions the community has, and as a result will write in hasty and weird answers that don't really make sense and make the story far more complicated than it needs to be. Even with a game like Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, the best attempt we've ever had at giving us answers, well, it just really didn't. Questions like what is Midnight Motorist, or what was Afton's motivation for killing the kids? These really still don't have good answers. There's theories, some good ones even, but nothing is ever truly answered. Everything in this series is just a guess, with little actual answers. Now, some of you might say that, well, that's kind of the whole point. The mystery of the story is how FNAF is as big as it is now after all. That's why people always come back to it. This is correct. I don't disagree with that statement. Five Nights at Freddy's would never have gotten popular if it gave us all the answers. But when all the answers we can come up with as a community is stuff like Nightmare Gas and whatever Illusion Disc are, and Agony and Remnant and all that stuff, I think it's time to take a step back and take a look at what could be done better. My hot take for the day is this. The Five Nights at Freddy's story, post Sky era of games, is told better. Now, don't get it twisted. I am not saying that the story is better. I am simply saying that the methods being used to tell the story are better. I still love the older parts of the timeline far better than the newer stuff, with all the AR and VR and AI takeover stuff. It's just that I favor the way Steel Wool tells FNAF's story way more than Scott does, in the sense that it's infinitely more understandable while still leaving those mysteries that classic FNAF had. One example of this is Cassie's dad. We arguably know more about this guy than anyone else in the story before this, even Afton himself. Multiple subtle hints like the Bonnie mask in Help Wanted 2, combined with the Bonnie collectibles in Ruin, give us a pretty good idea of who Cassie's dad is and his significance and role in the story. There's other examples of this, but the point is that Steel Wool is just better at telling the story. It's not perfect. I mean, look at Security Breach as a whole, but it is better than the old era of games. Also, as a side note, Security Breach wasn't really Steel Wool's fault, so I try not to count that one against them because according to Scott's recent interview, he literally didn't tell them what the story was and they just had to guess. So that's not really their fault. The problem with the series today is just how big it really has become. Think about it. Secret of the Mimic will be the 14th, depending on who you ask, mainline game in the series, all with the goal of connecting a single timeline. Now, I'm not one of those people who think, oh, FNAF should have ended at FNAF 6 or FNAF 4 or even FNAF 3, but I do think that at some point, this series needs to step back, look at the messy story it's created, and say, it's time for something else. I'm not saying that FNAF literally needs to end. That would be, well, stupid. I mean, look at my room. If FNAF ended, I would literally cry. I do, however, have an idea that I think would bring new life to this series, as well as making it more accessible to so many more people. Five Nights at Freddy's needs a reboot. Secret of the Mimic should be the last game in the current FNAF timeline, and the one after should begin a new timeline. This means different characters, locations, motives, everything. Now, maybe we could keep the same animatronic characters, at least the main four, but beyond that, change everything else. This would be a fresh start for the series. It would give Steel Wool a chance to go back to the whole ghost kids possessing giant robots thing, rather than all the AI mimicry of the modern FNAF era. It would bring the series back to what made it so popular in the first place, and with an actual plan in place for where the story could go, they could avoid messy solutions to simple problems like retcons, nightmare gas, illusion discs, using books to fill in missing parts, all the stuff that makes modern FNAF so confusing in the first place. I'm not saying we should get everything handed to us, but I think they should use the way they tell the story in Ruin as a baseline for how they tell this new story. A major reason that FNAF story is so confusing today is the books, and I have a solution for that too. They need a new approach to them. The community shouldn't be questioning whether or not they're canon to the games. Each one, maybe each series of books, could clearly state if they're canon or not. This would let us spend more time solving actual questions related to the lore, rather than everyone arguing about if this specific story in this specific book can be used for evidence or not. No more stupid retcons, again, like Nightmare Gas and Illusion Disc. Here they can also focus far more on characters and their motivations. With a proper team to write and create this new story, we could still have those classic FNAF mysteries, but with more clever hints and clues that lead to a more satisfying and engaging theory building world for the community. A major must-have for this reboot would be know And I mean no little hints that could imply any connection with the old timeline. That would just make things confusing again, which is what I'm trying to avoid. A lot of people probably do not like the idea of throwing away the current timeline in favor of a new one, but I personally think that this would improve FNAF as a whole if done correctly. It would give us a fresh start for the community. It would allow more people to get into the series easier, giving us a bigger community as a whole, leading to bigger things in the future. It would also bring us back to the roots of FNAF with ghost children and being in the robots rather than, again, the AI mimicry thing that has been going on in more recent games. All of this combined, I think, is more than enough reason to begin a new era for FNAF. What do you guys think about Five Nights at Freddy's and how its story is going? Do you guys think we need a reboot? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe, as that helps me out a lot and lets me know you want to see more. I love making them and I'm trying to do them better and more often. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.